A viewer called Gary sent this in for repair. I've actually had this in for repair about 3 years ago. It was gear trouble, I think, in one of the bogies. He's saying it's causing a problem, could have another look at it. So, no problem, Gary, here goes. Hi everybody, and welcome to a viewer's repair request, and this is a Graham Farish Class 43 in Midland Mainline livery, which, as I said in the intro, I've had in before. So first thing I'm going to do is have a little look and see how it behaves on the track. And you can hear that familiar clicking that comes from gear trouble. This time it is in this bogie here. So I ought to be able to get that working reasonably quick. The body shell opens reasonably easy by inserting your fingernail on each side, gently turn it over, and the chassis comes out, although it has to be manoeuvred out the front. Leave that to one side. So those are the bogies. This is a rear bogie with a coupler, so I'm just going to try and get that out quickly. The split chassis is held by this panel with a screw in each opposite corner. Underneath there is a clip at the front and the rear, and there's also the battery box as well. So I think we'll start off with the battery box. It simply unplugs. I'll take out these screws. And this PCB also provides the power feeds to the motor, so I need to be careful that I don't damage those. Then the clips pushed up. There, and finally there is a central retaining screw which goes into this nut. Oops, whatever it is, there it is. So hopefully that should allow the chassis to come apart. There we go, and the bogies fall out. The motor contacts are very delicate, and there, and all these parts as well. Right, so I think this is a suspect bogie. No, this is the front one, so it's probably going to be okay. So I think, oops, this is a rear bogie, so I think this is the one with the problem. So I'm going to have to remove the drive shaft to allow the rest of the gears to rotate freely. The drive shaft is in this turret housing, which seems to be held on with these two clips So I should be able to just prise this off. There we go. And now the bogey should run free. And you can see it's sticking. Yep, sticking there. I had to just leave this aside for a short while, so I'm back now after a couple of days. So to dismantle the bogey, there's a little clip at this end of the bogey. Put your thumbnail in, push the wheels up, coupler housing, which is an extended coupler because it's at the rear underneath the body shell, and that allows the mechanism to lift out from the bogey frame, which I'll put to one side. And again, a wee quick check, it's still jamming. When we look underneath, we've got axle gears front and rear and idler gears in the middle, and it's most likely at least one of these axle gears which are split. I'm going to remove one of these gears at a time. Just a pair of tweezers, prongs in there, and out comes the axle gear. Now there's a quick way of checking, and that is see if the gear will move freely along the axle. That one there seems pretty solid. So I'm going to check the other axle in the same way. Prise it out. Oops. Come on, there you come. Prise it out. And let's see if this gear slides along the axle. You can see how that slides quite freely along the axle, so that's definitely split. And this one seems quite solid, but I'm going to change both of them whilst they're here. My procedure for fitting a new axle gear is to take the axle. I'm going to set a gear at this end here, put that into the jaws vise and close the jaws until the gear sits on the axle. At this stage the jaws shouldn't close anymore because of it pressing against the axle. Then when the new gear is on, I'm going to use two already split gears, and they'll be fitted over the end of the axle because they slide very freely, and my experience tells me that two of these is the right distance to push the new gear into the center of the axle, which is slightly thicker than the rest. So that's the theory. Let's see how I do that. First of all, take these old gears off. I'm now going to take a new gear. I'm going to hold it in the jaws of the vise with this white tack. Oops. Apply the gear to the white tack. So that holds it there. So I've lined up the axle with the drive gear and slowly bring them together until I feel the axle hitting the jaw of the vise. There. Now I can fit one of the pusher gears, and line that up, and the axle should find its way into the old gear. There we go. So apply gentle pressure, and there we go. Until again I feel the axle hitting the jaw. There. So the new gear is partly on, and the old gear slides quite happily. So I just take that off, fix it there, another pusher gear, and I just repeat the process one more time, and that should fit the new axle gear. So in there, pressure, line it up, and that should slide on about there. There we go, until the new gear sits snugly in the centre of the axle, which coincidentally should be round about when the axle hits the jaw of the vise. There. So let's take this assembly out. The two pusher gears should come off, and the new drive gear is in the centre of the axle. Now all I have to do is fit the other wheel, just so see it there, so I can still use my sticky, tapey, gluey stuff. That goes in there, line that up, and this time when I'm tightening it, I can keep checking the back to back until it's set properly. About there. There we go. So that's my axle done. New gear on, correct width, and oops, I pushed that too far on and taken it off. And there we go, new axle fitted, and I will do the same to the other axle and get these back into the bogie. I'm going to put together the bogies. This one here, which moves freely, was the original bogie. This is the one I repaired. It's a trailing bogie, and the difference is that the coupler fits onto the trailing bogie. So the bogie quite simply fits into the frame. Two teeth at the front fit into the frame there. There is no coupler in the front of a class 43, and that just simply pushes down. Similarly here, into the front of the bogie, there is a coupler housing, but we don't use that. We in fact use this housing, which sits at this aperture here, and that has to be held in while this is closed, and it should get caught. Whoops, and I've missed it again. In there, just take the pressure off, put it in, keep it nice and tight, and close the bogie, and that's it held in there. And a quick check, I've got it the right way up. So that's the two bogies ready for installation back into the locomotive. One thing I haven't done yet is any lubrication, so let me correct that mistake right away. First of all, I'm going to apply a little bit of moly grease. Put it onto the blade of my knife and apply it, oops, a bit more I think, and apply it to the idler wheel just in there. And then that should work its way through the system. A bit of oil onto the axles, in there, in here and here. Again, that will work its way through the system. So now I'm going to rebuild the locomotive. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fit this collar to one end of the motor. The collar has got 3 little pips that fit into the securing holes in the motor. So they go in like so, and I align the motor into the chassis that way. And that sets the polarity of the motor. I'm going to fit in the turrets. They go in there, sit into the chassis. There's a little notch that accepts the vertical bar of this plus sign. So that fits in there, sits into chassis like that. Then I'm going to fit in this little insulating washer, if I can get a good hold of it, in there. So that's the motor and assembly there, just making sure everything's turning, and that's looking good. Now I'm going to bring the two halves of the chassis together, which is just meet up quite nicely. And there, the arm for the collar fits in there, and the two turrets should just slide in there. There we go, so that's looking fine there. And there are two chassis retaining clips that keep it together, there and there. I now have to fit the panel on top, with these arms have to sit over the poles of the motor. And you do that by putting one in, a slight bit of pressure, so that both arms are touching the contacts. They are. Slide quite easily, and they are held in by two minuscule screws. And now what we're doing is we are connecting the pickup from the turrets through the chassis to the motor contacts. And the second screw fits in here into the pillar. Try and catch it with a thread, and there we go. One here and one here. Make sure the contacts are on the motor. They are. A little bit of tightening, a little bit of tightening, and that should allow us to check the motor from the pickups and from the chassis. So I should be able to apply power to the chassis and get the motor to run. And that looks good, nice and quiet. Change direction. You can see that, I hope. Yep. So now is the moment of truth. Can I fit in the bogies and get them to run? So make sure I've got this pointing forward. So this is the front bogie with no coupler. So I'm going to sit that into the turret, wiggle it around, hopefully this should run. And it's going forward, positive to the right hand side, and in reverse. Probably might contact that probe, is it? Oh, it's working anyway. Take the second bogey, and when the bogey goes in, I'll try and show you, there are two little pins here and here. They fit through the turret to spring contacts which are located in the chassis halves. So we try to wiggle that down into position, and this should allow it to run. Even just a tad more voltage because of the extra torque. And both bogies running. Change direction. Bit more voltage. It's not quite, there's something else wrong with it. So let me just stop there, check things. Despite my valiant efforts, I've found that the little class 43 stops every now and again for no apparent reason, accompanied by a kind of burning smell. So I stripped it down, and now we've got the motor here. I'm going to try and carefully apply voltage across the terminals of the motor, and it works again. But before I turned the camera on to record, it wouldn't move at all. I think there's a dead spot in the motor, and depending on where it stops, it then refuses to start again. Of course, because it's intermittent, I can't really test it unless it happens. But I've got a feeling that the motor has been stressed just once too often. So I'll get another motor ordered up, and hopefully, right, now there's voltage across the terminals of the motor, and you can see that there's no life whatsoever. If I just turn the flywheel a little bit and try again, you can see that it does start to move, and then it stops. So I'm glad we actually caught that period where it didn't move. Of course, the momentum of it flying will take it past the dead spot most of the time. Let's see if we can catch it again. Turn the voltage down a little bit, and sometimes you just catch it. No, we're not going to get away with it this time. Oh, there we are. You see that? Oh, there it goes again. So there's definitely something intermittent internally in the motor. Yeah, so at least you can see. So move the motor past the dead spot, and it should run. And then it stops. So yeah, we've got a dead spot on the motor. And here we are, just a couple of days later, thanks to Farish Spares. Here's the new motor, and quick check. The old one is humming, but no movement, and the new one, hardly any voltage, away it goes. So let's do the rebuild one more time. I'm now ready to complete the rebuild, so I take the motor that gets fitted with this support collar that sits here, and that will allow it to just slide into the chassis. With the drive shaft secure into the gearbox, I can sit that in there, make sure it engages and that the turret lines up with the slot on the top of the chassis. Same on this side, drive shaft into the gearbox, sit the turret down and make sure it's engaged, and that's lined up into, there's a little notch, insert the washer spacer, make sure it's seated in properly, good, and now I can bring both halves of the chassis together. There, that sits neatly, turrets are lined up, that's good, and now I can apply these body clips, one at one end and one at the other end. I should now be able to just get my power probes in, and we should be able to see the gearbox turning. So the worm screws, one in there, one in there, and you can see that's working perfectly. The next stage is I'm going to fit the PCB, which is held in by two minuscule screws which I've kept in this box for security, because I got this fear I'm going to lose one of them. So far it hasn't happened. Right, I'm going to feed these prongs over the terminals of the motor, and I ought to be able to feed these screws into opposite corners. Come on. Small screw, little screwdriver, and then carefully line that up there. Try and catch the thread. Right, and the same with the second one. And there we are. So I should be able to apply some power to the chassis and the motor should run. So here goes, and you can see the worm screws rotating like so and so. So now I'm going to fit the securing bolt through the casing, which is secured at this end, or one end, with this little fixed former that goes in there, the bolt through here, through of course the insulating spacer, And if I get the right screwdriver, I should be able to secure that. Oh, sorry, I think that was out of shot. The former in here, the bolt through the chassis and connect it with the head, and that secures it there. And just a quick check, make sure everything's still okay. Yep, that's good. Right, it's time for the bogies. So a quick look at the chassis. This extended platform is at the rear, so the coupler, the bogie with the coupler goes to the rear, and it should be a push fit into the turret. So that should just simply sit in there. I find it kind of reluctant, sorry, we'll try again. It's reluctant to go in easily, especially when the camera's rolling. But then when you wiggle it about, it seems to just sort of sit in. And then you think it's in, but it isn't really. So let's see if I can take it out and try again. And there it goes, it just sort of fits in. So same with the front, that now when you're fitting the front bogie, this pointed bit, which in some chassis is actually a coupler housing, has to sit towards the inside of the locomotive, so that this bit here is flush with the casing. So just be aware of that. Put that in here, and again it's done its usual, half in, partly out, and I've just got to try and persuade it to sit in. And no, I thought I had it there. Sit it in. It probably will sit in by itself through use, but let me just try another little maneuver in there. Yep, and that's it. Nope, not quite, not quite. Right, I'll get that sorted. And as I predicted, this just suddenly clicked into place. So let's have a little look on the test track and see what it does. Looks alright. So I think it should go from your right to left, like that. And back again, very nicely, very smoothly. Okay, right, I'm going to take it over to the test track and set it up and run it round for a few laps. I'll try and get some footage of it, and then we'll come back to the bench to finish off the rebuild. Right, let's see what happens now. I'm putting on 3 volts, 4 volts, and away it goes. So let me just change the points. .9 volts, 100 milliamps. Nothing unreasonable about that. I like the look of that, that's nice. So I shall let that run for about half an hour or so, and then we'll take it back to the bench, and hopefully we should be able to wrap this one up for my viewer. Well, that's about 30 minutes just about up, and if there's never any problem, I think it's still going at the same voltage, and the current draw has fallen, so that's good. So I think we'll take it off the track and onto the bench. Here it comes this time, and that'll be fine there. I think I'm ready to wrap up this Class 43 in Midland Mainline, try again, in Midland Mainline livery for my viewer Gary. So all I have to do now is fit the casing. So the front slides into the nose section and swivels down and should click into the rear there, and underneath we have the battery box section. I don't know if it goes in one way as opposed to the other. Try it one way, if it works good, if it doesn't we'll just turn it round and try it again. So I'll move it around this way. That fits in nice. Yep, there we go. Gary's Midland Mainline locomotive. The problems with the 43 were of course the perennial drive axles. These have been replaced a while ago, and I replaced the 2 axles in this one. So my lesson is, next time I get one of these with any axle split, replace all of them in one go. Then of course I had another problem with the drive being intermittent, and this turned out to be the motor. So Graham Farish again came up, Farish Spares again came up with a very quick supply of the motor. So these parts are now redundant. Anyway, it's now going lovely, nice and smoothly. So other than just going back over the track and get a few end shots, I think I'm just about finished here. Okay, so until we see you again, take care everybody, and it's bye for now.